All right, the last section of chapter 2 mirrors what we saw in chapter 1, where it ends in how you can develop competence in mediated communication. I'm going to guess this is theoretically something you already know. Probably learned this in middle school, if not before, but let's go over it anyways. It's a good reminder, just in case you've forgotten any of these. Yes, I have plenty of memory. Okay, so we're going to look at 3 different areas that we need to consider in developing competence in mediated communication. The first one is to consider the channel, and under that we're going to have 3 different areas. When we say consider the channel, we want to think about the idea of richness and leanness. So a message is rich when it has a lot of nonverbals as part of it. Oh, this is the information that lets us know how the communicator feels about the topic and about the other person they're communicating with. In mediated communication, whether it's interpersonal or mass, that's missing. What you have are the words, you have the content, maybe a few emojis, but a lot of the relational dimension is missing. And so taking that into consideration, if you take that into consideration, you can determine which is the best message route to take. What channel are you going to use, realizing that communicating via mediated communication is much leaner. Interesting, because communication is leaner, it can lead to something that is called hyper-personal communication, where you are much more, people are more likely to share information about themselves that they wouldn't tell anyone face to face on just knowing them for a short period of time, but there's a little bit of anonymity behind the screen, so people will sometimes share the things they would not. Okay, so here's a nice graphic, again, another continuum that shows that texting, email, texts, letters, anything posted online where all you have are the words tends to be very lean. Once you do something like a phone call or even leaving a voicemail, it's a little bit richer because your tone of voice, your volume is there. If you add in the audio, visual, Skyping, FaceTiming, video conferencing using Zoom, WebEx, Collaborate, and Blackboard, all of these are a little more richer because you can actually see the person, but the richest by far is face-to-face interaction. So I'd like you to do this as you are thinking about the concepts of the channel. Create a chart. Don't go overboard. 1 to 5 people in your life and the primary way you communicate them. Is it mostly rich? Is it mostly lean? Or have you embraced multimodality? Okay. And think about why the communication channels work or don't work for this relationship. And if you feel they're not really working, what would you say to that person to create a richer channel? Let's stop. Anyways, I will let you figure that one out. Okay. Another thing to think about in the channel is the idea of synchronicity. I love that word. It's a cool word. If I'm talking to you and I say, "How are you?" you've got to respond right away. We are synchronous. If you go out, if I say, "Hey, how are you?" and you leave and you go to the restroom and you come back in 5 minutes, I'm going to think something's seriously wrong. But if someone texts you, "How are you?" and you don't answer for 5 minutes, that person might not be saying, okay, something is seriously wrong. Because much of mediated communication, obviously not if you're FaceTiming, is asynchronous. And I wanted to do a little aside here about online classes. You might have noticed, or you might have actually participated in online classes that were asynchronous, which we call ONLN, online, where you log in whenever you want, as long as you get things in by the deadline, you're okay. Or synchronous is what we call LRON, live remote online, where there's a specific time you have to log in. I'm just curious what you find works better for you, and does it depend on the class that you're taking also? Okay, so what are the benefits of communicating asynchronously as opposed to synchronously? Not just in terms of classes, but just in general in terms of communication. The third aspect of considering the, considering the channel is the idea of permanence, right? Once you've used technology, that message exists, okay? There are pros and cons of messages that can last forever. I like the example the book gave, where if you send an email to your boss and you say, I need to come in late on Monday, and the boss says, sure, no problem, as long as you're here by 9:30, you're fine. And then when you show up at 9:20, the boss starts making comments about how they can't count on you. You can pull up the message and say, you told me it was okay. Okay, so that is a pro, I would say. What's the con? I remember years ago sending an email message to a bunch of my colleagues, and I thought it was really kind of funny at the time. It was a little bit of a joke. And when people responded, of course they responded to my message, so I had to read that message over and over and over. And the more I read it, the more I cringed and said, boy, I wish I hadn't said it that way. So that could be a con of something lasting forever. I don't use Snapchat. So because Snapchat is not permanent, disappears very quickly, is that a guarantee of safety? And what do we mean by safety? That's just something I would like to understand more about. Okay. The second component of developing competence in mediated communication is being careful of what you post. I gave an example of sending an email that was embarrassing, not because just because I was being a little bit silly. I mean, there are many layers or levels of embarrassment. Something that you send to a friend, if they ended up sharing it with other people, would that be terribly embarrassing? They tell people it's a good idea to do a social media inventory before applying for new jobs and getting rid of stuff that maybe is embarrassing that you don't want your potential employers to see. And then, of course, there's the idea of sexting. How often does this go wrong? You send a sexy pic to your significant other, a little while later you break up, and all of a sudden your parents' bowling league is seeing these pictures because your ex has decided they want to get back at you. So, I'm not your mom, I'm not your boss, but I would say be careful about what you post. Okay. It's also important when you're thinking about what you post to respect privacy boundaries. So, my sister sends me, she is a middle school teacher, and she sends me funny things about education, and I forward them to friends. And I know that she's perfectly fine with me sharing that message. If she happened to send me something and it was kind of funny, but it had to do with one of her sons, and it may be an embarrassing situation the two of them were in. If I sent that to other people, I think I crossed a line there. There's a boundary I should not have crossed. And so the bottom line is, when in doubt, if you say, well, this is great, I want to share it with other people, ask the original poster if that's okay to do. Okay. Again, under the idea of being careful what you post, make sure you keep your tone civil. I think my parents used to say, you never lose anything by being polite. Even if you're really ticked off with someone and, they were rude to you and you want to be rude back to them, maybe bite your tongue and try to be civil. So find a message that you have sent. Take a look at it and say to yourself, would I deliver the same message in person? If I was face to face with this person, would I say this? Are there any messages where you would, it would not like, oh, maybe not, but you would say, nope, absolutely no. If you can't think of any, I have posted a link to this. I'm going to ask you to watch Men Read Mean Tweets to Female Sports Reporters. And it's very interesting to notice not just how the women react, but also how the men react to these communications or tweets, mean tweets. They're not, I won't say anymore. Okay. The third component of developing competence in mediated communication is to consider the communicators and their environment. Remember back from chapter 1, what does environment mean? It's not just where the person is. Don't if you know someone's in public, don't be sending, I don't know, I just went blank on what I was going to tell you. Don't don't ask someone to open a video that's going to play something. But in addition to that aspect of environment, it also has to do with the person's background. So, okay, you're ready to send a message to someone. Consider the receiver's preferences. You want to communicate with grandma. What is the best way to do this? Or great grandma, if you're lucky enough to have one still. Is a phone call better? Are you better off actually visiting face to face? Can you and grandma on Instagram? Okay. And whenever possible, use multimodality. Visit, to have a face-to-face conversation. Also send a text, and then maybe even, share something you saw on Pinterest. Okay. This next one is a real issue for me. Respect others' needs of undivided attention. I understand that people who are of, I don't even remember which generation it is, Gen Z and beyond, you were raised with technology and mediated communication, and you are constantly multitasking. But people from my generation, and even younger people, really find that if we are having a conversation with someone and that person is looking at their phone, that's rude, it's disrespectful. It drives me nuts when my children do that, and my daughter says, I'm listening, and not really. There's always something that's missing because you're not picking up on the whole message. Okay, maybe you don't think they need undivided attention, but who gets to determine how much attention somebody needs? How about the person, the receiver there? Be mindful of bystanders. Sometimes I swear people who have private conversations in restaurants and in the grocery stores, really? You want to share all of that information with the whole world? Okay. And then also the last point under considering the communicators and environment is to make sure that you're balancing mediated time and face time. So there's a interesting assessment that you can do that's on the bottom of page 51, goes on to page 52, and it asks you to assess how much time you're spending online, and it's a 1 to 8 scale. 1 meaning this is not descriptive of me, up to 8, whoa, boy, is this descriptive of me. So you can take a look, you can assess your communication and see if maybe you need to back away a little bit from mediated communication and spend some more time face-to-face with people. Okay, so as I said, this is my big issue. Why is it so hard to say, or maybe it's not hard for you to say, put that phone away and talk to me? And so the question is, why do people want to be together only to divide their attention. Think back to that video I asked you to watch about, I think it's called I Forgot My Phone. All right, so here's a little story. I was in line, I think it was to get my second COVID shot, long line, snakes around the building. And there's a young man who was 2 people ahead of me who had his head down on his phone the whole time, and the line would move and he would just stand there. I think he was with his mother or his sister, I'm not sure. And then she would, after a couple of minutes, she would say something and he would move forward. I don't know why that ticked me off. And so the next time that happened, I said, dude, why don't you put your phone down and pay attention to what's going on? I don't think I said it in a mean way, but the guy in front of me, who was in back of this young man, turned around and kind of looked at me. That was a little bit of a chill out, lady. And I did realize that he wasn't talking to me. And whether he moved or not, we were going to get to the front of the line I was going to get to the front of the line when I got to the front of the line. But for some reason, it bothered me. And I think it's because I see it as people not being in the here and now. Okay, anyways. So, looking back at chapter 2, can you tell me what are the benefits and drawbacks of mediated communication? At least some of them. Second section, how can we distinguish between mediated interpersonal communication and mass personal communication, and how can we use each type appropriately? Last of all, how would you apply the principles of competence to your own mediated interpersonal communication and mass personal communication? All right, and this is the end of chapter 2. And let me stop.